Mr. Bishop.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a statement from one of my constituents who is engaged in an effort to organize a T-Mobile workplace in my district.
Without objection.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Let me quote from it. Gentleman's name is William Reitz. In my experience, T-Mobile USA has abused the current rules at great cost to me, my fellow employees, and the American taxpayer, and their behavior as a company is an example of the desperate need for change. They have used delaying tactics to give the managers time to coordinate attacks on the union we are trying to join, threaten our jobs and our benefits, and even try to gerrymander our bargaining unit for the election. After several months of this verbal and emotional assault, I stand firm in my commitment to gaining a voice at work. What I am asking for is a fair chance to vote. What I am asking for is a fair chance to vote. I would suggest that is the essence of our democracy, a fair chance to vote. Now, Chairman Schomburg, one of the tactics that is being used in this particular organizing drive is a request on the part of T-Mobile to request a hearing to determine whether or not the Communication Workers of America constitutes a legitimate labor entity. Now, that is a union that has existed for decades. My father was a member of that union, and he's long retired, and it represents hundreds of thousands of workers. Would you consider such a request for a hearing to determine if that union is a legitimate labor entity to be a reasonable use of the board's time and taxpayer money?
I don't want to be unfair to T-Mobile, but I'd give it pretty short shrift.
In other words, I wouldn't infer from that response that you would consider that to be a delaying tactic on the part of T-Mobile?
Yes, but let me say, Congressman, there are no instances cited by the majority of delay pre-election, and my experience is they very rarely have ever happened. The dissent only mentioned one, and that wasn't analyzed by the majority.
Let me try it a different way. In the chairman's opening statement, he indicated, I believe I'm quoting him exactly, any party causing a needless delay should be held accountable. Is that a pretty close quote, Mr. Chairman?
You want to read it again?
Any party causing a needless delay should be held accountable.
That's your quote.
No, I'm quoting you, sir. Would you believe, now, I think we're establishing that this constitutes a needless delay. I think that CWA, any reasonable person would say that that is a legitimate labor entity. Let me get to my question. If we are to hold any party that is causing a needless delay accountable, is not the proposal in the proposed rule to consolidate hearings a reasonable means of holding a party accountable that's causing a delay?
I don't believe so, because you're talking about the exception to the rule. I don't think you can establish your whole system on these exceptions. And the majority, by the way, never justified what it's doing by identifying exceptions and by analyzing.
Let's just stay with this example. If you were still a member of the NLRB, what would you consider a reasonable remedy to hold a T-Mobile or others of its ilk accountable for this kind of unreasonable delay?
There are no remedies under the statute. I think I may comment on it in a footnote, and if it truly was a frivolous issue, I think I could comment on it fairly strongly.
Does not the fact that there are no remedies in existing law, does that not build the case for why it is we need the kind of proposed remedy that is put in place by this proposed rule?
No, because once again, we're talking about outliers. When I became chairman, I asked for a list of cases. There wasn't a single request for review that's pre-election pending. There were 16 post-election challenges and objections. 4 were within the last few months. 11 were the last year. A number of them could not be decided because we didn't have sufficient members on the board to decide them. It had nothing to do with the election process. There was one case, unfortunately, a 2004 case that wasn't decided upon until, I think, last year, but there were particular circumstances there. But again, we're talking about the outliers. We're not talking about...
I have about 5 seconds left.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Dow-Schmidt, would you, I know you wanted to comment on the allegation that you were proposing a redistribution of wealth. Would you care to take 5 seconds to comment?
Actually, there is a purpose section right in the National Labor Relations Act, if Mr. Gowdy wanted to look at it, that says the purpose of the National Labor Relations Act is to promote industrial peace and equality bargaining power between employers and employees. And back when it was originally passed in the 1930s, there was a conscious idea that if employees had free choice, they would choose unions. If they had equality bargaining power, they would gain higher wages, and that would actually be good for the economy and help get us out of the Great Depression. So that is, in fact, part of the purposes of the Act.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.